Okay, we're going to look at the mural book, A Glorious Institution, Lesson 6. So check your own paper as we go through. Number 1, what man is considered to have begun Christian monasticism? What do you say, Griff?
Anthony of Thebes.
That is correct. Any questions? Number 2, in what country did he live? Amelia?
Egypt.
That is correct, Egypt. Number 3, what verse guided him to become a monk? John?
Matthew 19:21.
That is correct. Matthew 19:21. Everybody speak nice and loudly so that those who are watching can hear without me having to repeat every answer, okay? Everybody talk up nice and loud. Number 4, what man organized the first group of monks? Stephen? Right, Pachomius, that is. Number 5, what was the one basic rule of his monastery? Matthew?
The rule of service.
Right. Number 6, what does Chrysostom mean? Zach?
Golden mouth.
Right. And did he have a lot of fillings in his mouth? Is that why he had that name? Why was he called a golden mouth?
He spoke well.
Yeah, exactly. Number 7, after becoming a bishop, Chrysostom preached against what 2 things? Noah, you get both of them.
The vices of the congregation.
Right? What does that mean, vices of the congregation? What are vices?
Wrongdoing.
Yeah, sinful things they're doing. And the second one?
Corruption in high places of government.
Right. Vices of the congregation, corruption in government. Any questions? Okay, that's worth 2 points then because there's 2 answers there. You have a question, Zach?
What was that, Ricky?
Number 3, all the way back to number 3, Matthew 19:21. Any others? All right, lesson 7, new trials and great triumphs. Number 1, from which direction did the Roman Empire find new and terrible forces to fight? Griff?
Northern.
Right, the northern frontiers. You could have added also east of the Rhine, north of the Danube, but all we need is northern.
Northward.
Pardon me?
Is northward.
North, yeah. North, northern, northward, north, anything with north. Number 2, as the Germanic tribes fought the Romans, what had motivated them to invade the Roman territory? Amelia?
Because we were a sport group that had to choose what we
You said they're a split group?
Mhm.
What do you mean?
Like they did something where they split.
Well, there's something that forced them, moved them to move in the direction that they did. John, do you have it?
Wearing against the German tribes were the
Mongolian?
Huns.
Right, warring against them were the Mongolian Huns. So the Mongolian Huns were coming from the east. If you see up here is Europe, Asia, Europe. The Mongolian Huns were coming this direction and pushing against the Germanic tribes, which then forced them to move down into the Roman Empire. So you need to have something there about the Mongolian Huns, or the Huns at least. Any question? All right, number 4. In what year was Rome attacked by the Goths under Alaric? Stephen? Correct. You have a question? I skipped number 3.
Yeah.
Oh, well, let's go back to it then after we do number 4.
Okay.
All right, did you get number 4?
Yeah.
All right, number 3. How did Theodosius I bring peace to the warfare with the barbarians? What do you have there, Matthew?
He concluded a treaty.
Well, that's what peace is. So you haven't said anything additional than what's in the question. Basically, you've said, how did Theodosius bring peace? And you said, he brought peace. So you didn't answer the question. Zach, did you answer the question?
I had a Theodosius instead concluded a treaty with the leaders in 382.
Okay, basically you said the same thing too, that he had peace. He brought a treaty. He didn't tell how he did it. So far, no one's told me how. Stephen, you know how?
He accepted them all as one.
All right, so he allowed them to come in as one group of people to settle as a unit. That's one part of it. He should have gone further than that. Anybody put more than that? Noah?
Accepted them all as one block of federates within the imperial borders.
Okay, that's still, he accepted them to come in as one group. There were a couple other things he allowed them to do too. Nobody has it? Also to keep their own laws, and in return for providing soldiers and farm workers to the Romans. So they were allowed to settle as a unit. They were allowed to keep their own laws, and they were in response to that, provide soldiers and farm workers for the Romans. So basically, there's three things that were a part of this peace treaty. I guess if you just have that they came in as a unit, we'll take that. But it's not a very complete answer. All right, any questions about your answer? You need to at least have that. All right, so we have number 4. Number 5, who was known as the Scourge of God? Griff.
Attila.
Just any old Attila? Attila the barber? Attila the farmer? Attila the Scotsman? What Attila? You think there might be more than one Attila?
No. It's one of those.
Stephen? Yeah, Attila the Hun, or the King of the Huns. Yeah. If you just have Attila, I'm afraid we'll have to take off half a point. Let's be complete in our answers. There were lots of people named Attila at one time or another. Maybe not today. Attila the Hun. How many had Attila the Hun, or something close to that? Only one person had the Hun? Oh. The rest of you are being slothful, I suspect. Number 6, who negotiated a peace with the Huns, sparing the city of Rome? Noah.
Valentinian III.
No. Amelia.
Pope Leo the First.
Right, Pope Leo the First. Number 7, the unconquered eastern part of the Roman Empire became known as what? Matthew.
The Eastern or Byzantine Empire.
Yes, either Eastern or Byzantine Empire, either one of those. Number 8, what was its capital? John.
Constantinople.
Correct. Number 9, what man took the gospel to the Goths? We talked about him in class. Zach?
Eusebius of the
We're on 9.
Eusebius of Nicomedia.
No, that's not the right guy. Griff?
Oh, Philus.
Right. That might be correct. I usually say Ulfilas, but I don't know. I've never met anybody with that name, so I'm not sure how to pronounce it exactly. You may be right. Ulfilas. How many of you got that one? All right. Okay, we're doing better on that one anyway. All right, number 10. What were the 2 spiritual challenges that faced the church after the fall of Rome? Give me one of them. Stephen.
To evangelize the barbarians.
Correct. That's one. Evangelize the barbarians. What's the second one? Noah?
To educate something for the nations.
To educate the nations is the second one. All right, so 2 points. Evangelize the barbarians and educate the nations were the challenges that the church faced after the fall of Rome. Number 11, in the midst of world change, how did the church help to preserve her own culture and heritage? So what did you have there, John?
Copied the Bible and other important books.
Yeah, and where did that happen? What kind of places did that happen? Zach?
Small cells.
Sorry, what was that again?
Small cells.
Small cells. That just means small groups of people. Where? What kind of places did this copying the scriptures take place? I know it's been 2 days since we talked about it. And in 9th grade years, that's like 10 years. In monasteries. So godly men in some monasteries were busy copying the scriptures and promoting true spiritual life. So that when civilization began to grow again, there was a foundation upon which to build. So, how did the church help to preserve her own culture and heritage? I'm not sure. Did nobody had monasteries down? I mean, that's a key part of this. So in monasteries, there were people that were copying the scriptures. How many had copying the scriptures? Okay, so you all got that part. We just didn't have who or where. All right. I guess that kind of answers the question. John?
For number 10, if you have one
Then
of the two.
take off 1 point for the one you don't have.
Okay.
Worth 2 points. All right, number 12. What king of the Franks converted to Christianity? How many of you had Oscar Mayer? No, okay, that's good. I thought sure Griff would put Oscar Mayer. What did you put?
Clovis.
Clovis is correct. Clovis was the king of the Franks. Number 13. Who became the apostle of Ireland? Zach.
A British monk named Patrick.
That's correct, Patrick. Number 14. Who became the apostle of Germany? Noah.
Boniface.
Right, or Boniface. And number 15, who was the first pope to take broad political powers to himself? Amelia. You didn't get this one? Griff?
Gregory the Great.
Right, Gregory the Great. We'll talk about him a little bit later. All right, there are 23 points altogether on these 2 lessons. So count up how many points you have off, put it at the top, circle it so I can find it easily. Let me have your papers then. I'll pass them over to Griff. Griff will lay them right there. And we want to open our notes then and look at the fall of Rome. Matthew, would you go back and turn off lights, please? So the folks at home can see our screen better. Thank you. All right, we have been in the Roman Empire for quite some time. We have seen quite a lot happen over the many years that we've been looking at history of at the beginning of Rome and then on through the Roman Republic. And then when it came to be an empire, all the different emperors that we saw, many different movements, different philosophies. We saw Christianity come on the scene, and we've seen the church under persecution. Finally, the church is accepted in the Roman Empire. We've seen how the church has grown, how eventually some got into monasticism, some became missionaries. So there's been a lot happen through the course of all the years that we have spent looking at the Roman Empire, or Rome. But finally we get to the place where after many, many years, Rome collapses. And we want to see the reasons for Rome's decline. In the 3rd century, a series of political, economic, and social crises shook the foundations of the empire, resulting in a decline that led to the eventual collapse in the 4th and 5th centuries, brought about by barbarian invaders. So it began in the 3rd century. It took several hundred years for Rome to finally fall apart. And the falling apart comes to an end where it actually collapses because of the barbarian tribes coming in. So let's look at what the different reasons are for Rome's decline, and think, and I'm sure you'll automatically think, how does any of this apply to America today? Many people have compared America to Rome, and maybe you've heard people say, oh, just like what happened to Rome is happening in the United States. Well, we'll look at that and see whether that's true or not. The first item that helped to bring about the decline of Rome was political disorder. As the size of government increased, inefficiency and waste replaced strength and stability. So anytime you have government getting bigger and bigger, you have more and more inefficiency. That is, things aren't done well, and waste. There's a lot of waste of money. Someone figured out a few years ago, and I'm sure the figures haven't changed that much, that if you took every person on welfare and gave them directly the money that it takes to run the welfare system to get them the little bit that they get maybe in food stamps or whatever, it just gave them the money directly, they would each one get over $40,000 a year. Well, are they getting anywhere near that if they're on welfare? No. That's how much money it takes in the system to run it. So anytime you have the government running something, it takes a lot of money, it's inefficient and wasteful. Because a definite plan for choosing a successor to the emperor was never adopted. Remember, they went from one emperor to another. Sometimes it was a son, sometimes it was somebody else. They never had anything set up exactly as to who would be the next emperor, and therefore there was unstable leadership. And this led to increasing involvement of the army, and especially the Praetorian Guard, with ambitious generals plotting to gain control. And what do we have eventually? We have generals that become the emperors. Now, they actually do a better job than those that were before them, but the point is that there was nothing set up as to how, when one emperor died, another emperor would come into the spot. And then there was just political turmoil in general between the Senate and the emperor, between different people in the Senate. There was assassination that would take place from time to time. Civil war became commonplace. We talked about several different civil wars that were a part of Rome as a republic and then as an empire. So all that is summarized in looking at the fact that there were political problems. There was political disorder that got worse and worse in the Roman Empire. Any questions or comments? All right, what do you think right now? Anything here stand out to you as saying, yeah, I can see that in America, happening in America? We have a lot of political turmoil today, don't we?
Everything on the sea.
John?
Everything on the sea, because political turmoil, assassinations, and civil war.
Yeah. Now, we haven't had an assassination in a while, but we have had in our country. And I read an article recently that points out that we are in a civil war right now. It's what's called a cold civil war. They're not actual fighting with weapons, but there is a definite divide in America between two sides that are fighting one another, but they're fighting one another with words and actions other than using bullets and things like that. Okay, the next reason for the decline of Rome is economic troubles. The Roman treasury was drained by the cost of maintaining an increasingly large army and the expenses of a huge government bureaucracy. Costs a lot of money to have that large army covering that much empire, right? Because you've got to have soldiers on the frontiers, in between. They've got to be ready to go at any time. You've got a large army to take care of. And the bureaucracy simply refers to all the government officials that you have. And so it was a drain. It costs a lot of money to do that. And so what do you do if you've got, I'm sorry, I forgot to put that chart up there. What do you do if in the government you have a lot of expenses? What do you have to try to do? What should you try to do if you have a lot of expenses? How are you going to pay them?
With taxes.
All right, so you have to somehow you have to get more money coming in, don't you, in order to pay all the money going out. And so there were a couple things that they did. One was, as John suggested, they raised taxes. Now, there's a particular political party in our country today that always seems to be in favor of raising taxes. They want to spend more money, and so they want to raise taxes in order to have more money to spend. There's a second thing that the Romans did that you might find interesting, and that is that they reduced the silver content in Roman coins, adding cheaper metals. That's called devaluation. Are you familiar with that word? Can anybody figure out how this relates to reducing silver content? Devaluation?
Takes the value out of it.
Takes the value out of it. Good, John. So, or decreases the value specifically. So when you decrease the value of the silver content in the coins, or let me put it this way, when you reduce the silver content in the coins, how does that devalue the money? How does it devalue it? How does it make the value less? What would you say, Noah?
It's not worth what it is.
Yeah, it's not worth what it was because there's less silver. There's less valuable metal in it. Does everybody follow that? So if you reduce the silver content, and how would they do that? Well, they might just skim the edges off of a coin, you know, and then if you do that to enough coins, pretty soon you have enough to make a new coin, but you haven't had to have any more money to do it. You skimmed it off of what was already there. So they devalued the money, which means that the money they're trying to increase the amount of coins they have. Because understand, if a government is in debt, if they're spending more than what they have coming in, you have to figure out a way to meet those debts. Now, let's say the government has bought something from Griff. Maybe he's sold them wheat. Okay, you sold them wheat. And he's charged them $5,000 for the wheat that he sold them. All right, the government doesn't have the $5,000, so what do? Well, they scrape some silver off of enough coins, and maybe they have $4,000, and so they scrape up enough to get another $1,000 worth of coins, and so then they give him the $5,000. Follow so far? But is that $5,000 worth the same as it was before they took the silver off?
Yes.
No, because it has less silver. You see? It has less silver. Now, they're calling it the same amount. They're saying this is $5,000, but is it the same value as the $5,000 before they took silver off of all those coins?
No.
No, it sees less silver. So in reality, is he getting the amount of money he should get for his wheat? No. He's actually getting less, but they're calling it the same. You see? That's what government does. And that's what happens whenever coins are debased. And what does that lead to? Well, that means the next time he sells wheat, is he going to charge $5,000 for that wheat? He's going to charge more because he knows the coins are worth less. Do you follow? Everybody follow that? It's a simple economic principle. The governments either don't understand or they understand very well and they're trying to do this on purpose. All right, so what happens when the price of his wheat goes from $5,000 for all the wheat he sells to $5,500? And everybody else who realizes we're getting smaller coins, what does everybody else do? They all raise their prices, right? So they get the right amount of value, even though it's a higher number. What is that called? when the prices go up because the coins are a lot worth less.
Inflation.
Inflation. You familiar with that word, right? Inflation. Prices are going up. All right. Now, that's good for the government who has debts. Is it good for the people generally who have to buy stuff? No. Because the government, at least for this part of it, is paying off debts with less money than what they really owe. But everybody else has to pay higher prices. Do you follow? That's something that's something that's true in any economy. All right, now, in the United States, from time to time, taxes are increased. Now, thankfully, under our current president, taxes were decreased. And periodically, there are presidents that get in, there are Congresses that get in that decrease our taxes. But a lot of the time, taxes should keep going up. If not federal, state taxes, local taxes, local school districts always want you to vote for more money for them, etc. All right, now, another way to raise revenue, like we said, was decreasing the silver content. Now, has that happened in the United States? Has the silver content been decreased in our coins? Does anybody have a quarter? Nobody has a quarter? You guys all poor?
Basically.
Have you ever looked at a quarter? If you guys can see it from the distance or not. When you look at a quarter from the side, what do you notice? Yeah, there's an orange streak in the middle. It's called a sandwich. What's a sandwich? You put something in the middle, something on the outside. So in this sandwich, what do you see on what's on the outside? What's it look like on the outside? Silver. And it's silver mixed with some other metals. But what you don't see, unless you look at it on the side, is what's on the inside. What's on the inside? It's sort of brownish copper. Now, which is how's the value of copper compared to the value of silver? A lot less. So what did they do? When they sandwiched that coin, they didn't trim silver off the edges, and that's why there are ridges on there, so nobody could do that themselves. So what did they do instead? They took it out of the middle and put copper in there instead. And that devalued that quarter. You follow? The government did that in order to make quarters so they can make them cheaper and spend them like they were before, but they're not actually worth as much as they were before. And what happened as a result of that? Inflation. John?
Couldn't that be how that we have more money than gold we have?
Yeah, that's another issue where we're printing money. The original idea when you print money is that piece of paper stands for a certain amount of gold or silver that you actually have. In fact, when I was your age, I think, maybe probably a little younger than you, if you got a $20 bill, it would have written on it silver certificate, which meant that you could take it to any bank and they would give you that amount of silver coins. But back then the coins weren't devalued, so they really were silver coins, and you could get that much silver for your $20 bill. But that doesn't happen anymore. Now you can take it to the bank and get enough quarters or half dollars, whatever, but it's not all silver anymore. So that's been devalued. The paper doesn't say that anymore on it. So that the paper money that we use doesn't have anything backing it up anymore except the goodwill of the American government. As long as people trust that the American government's going to keep on functioning, they'll continue to use the paper money because there's nothing backing it up. But once the people lose confidence in our government, if we ever get to that point and they stop accepting paper money, we'll have an economic collapse.
Right. I think actual silver coins now $16 to $20.
It depends the age, the condition, things like that. So yeah, if you find some real silver coins, they may be worth more than, like if it was a silver dollar, it might be worth more than $1 if it's in good condition, because silver prices are high. They keep going up. Yeah. So that's why you see people advertising on TV all the time, you know, buy silver coins or buy gold, because the real stuff, the price keeps going up. It's a good investment. But the real stuff is not what's being used anymore in our coins. Even our, let's see, what's another example? Well, even in the quarter, there's more other metals mixed in besides the silver. And you know, for pennies, it's ridiculous. It costs the government more to produce a penny than a penny's worth. So by us using pennies, the government's actually losing money when they're producing them. So that's why some have called for let's eliminate pennies. But you know, it's kind of a sad situation that we're in. All right, so looking at what Rome did, we can see the United States has done the same things economically. All right, so you had a quick economics lesson in world history at no extra charge. Okay, so you can take that to the bank, pun intended. All right, so the result, you already told me, is inflation, right? Prices go up. As the coins decline, the value of coins decline, prices rise. And that makes sense to you, right? Now, another aspect that I find very interesting here is that Rome, you know, we think of, you know, Rome is a huge empire, covers a large part of the Mediterranean world. But there were other parts of the world. And Rome traded with other parts of the world. But the trade with a couple other areas, especially in Asia, was rather one-sided. In other words, Rome was importing goods and paying for them, but wasn't exporting any goods. So that means the money is only flowing one way. You understand? So they're buying silk from China, they're buying spices from India, and the money in the Roman money is going that way, but they're not selling anything to get any money back. That's called a trade deficit. You ever heard that term? That means you're in the negative side of money. Now, it doesn't mean you're not getting your value of what you're buying. It just means that it's kind of lopsided as far as the money flow goes. Well, very interesting that Rome's trade deficit was with one of the countries with whom we have a trade deficit, China. Now, we don't have that with India so much, but China, we have a huge deficit. In fact, not only do we have a huge deficit with China as far as trade goes, but when our government borrows money in order to function, to pay for everything, when they borrow money, oftentimes they borrow from citizens. So when you buy a savings bond, that's the government borrowing money from you. But there's not enough people buying savings bonds. So they had to borrow it from other places. They borrow from banks, but they're also borrowing from China.
Yeah.
Our U.S. government owes China a huge amount of money. Yeah, I suspect it might be higher than that. Well, so what happens when China says, hey, pay up? That could be a difficult situation, couldn't it? Yeah. And in addition to that, China is also buying up properties in the United States. In fact, one of the properties they bought was an old naval base in California. Now, what would they want with an old naval base? Kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? Okay, so we're kind of following along the same pathway as Rome did as they were coming to their demise. All right, so when that is true, when these things are happening in an economy, confidence in the economic future of Rome all but collapsed. People began to say, look, the economy is not going well. We've got inflation, we've got all the trade deficit, we've got all this stuff going on. Things are not getting better. They're getting worse economically. So you got the devaluation and the scarcity of money. Eventually, because the money is not worth much and there's not many coins available, people went back to the system of bartering. You know what that is, right? No more using money. We're just going to trade things all the time. Now that's a step backwards economically. That means you can't conduct trade as easily because it's hard for me to trade a part of my cow for, you know, some of his wheat. You know, what do I cut it up? How do I do that? You know, so bartering is more difficult, but that's what people were forced to do because the economy was going so badly. So that decreased trade. If you've got to barter for everything, you're just not going to trade that much. You're going to try to raise your own stuff. And what's that? What happens to stores then? They close. If you have, I mean, can you imagine going into Walmart and saying, "I've got a pig here, I'd like to trade for something"? You know, that's not going to work. So stores close, shops close. And what happens when you have a scarcity of money, when there's less trade, when stores are closing? What's the result for the average person? Poverty. Poverty increased. So, today we've seen that two reasons for the decline of Rome were the political instability and then secondly, economic troubles. Tomorrow we'll see some other reasons why Rome fell, and we'll continue to look and evaluate as to whether those things are true of the United States as well. Let's see, for tomorrow, there is no assignment. Just look over the notes, make sure you understand everything that's there. Make sure that you can explain it to somebody else. In fact, try to explain it to somebody else. You're dismissed.